Welcome everyone. In this tutorial, we are going to continue with basics in Rhino. We previously talked about 2D tools and commands. Those are sort of a prerequisite for what we're going to get into here with surfaces, open and closed poly surfaces, and closed poly surfaces, meshes, and object relationships. So let's start with the more basic of the three, surfaces. I'm going to run us through a couple of commands here. They're all very helpful. Sweep 1, sweep 2, and surface from planar curves. Let's look at these first. So in these examples, sweep 1 and sweep 2 will require either just a pair of intersecting curves like these two here. They converge here at a point, or it would work as well to do something like a rectangle made of separate curves, none of which are joined. So let's just play with this rectangle here first. And by the way, you can see I'm in my perspective viewport. You can swap between top, front, right, and perspective all down here in the bottom left corner. So, all right, in the command bar, let's type sweep 1. And it asks us to select a rail. That could be any of these curves. Let's just do the top one. And then it asks to select sweep shapes. I'll just click on one of the perpendicular lines there and then enter. And it'll ask me if I want to make some specifications with this surface, but I'm just going to leave it the way it is. And let's see what we have here. If I click anywhere on this, it tells us in the command history, one open surface added to selection. All right, cool. Let me delete that surface for now, and let's see if sweep 2 is any similar. So sweep 2 in the command bar. Now it says select first rail. So that tells me there might be a second rail that it wants too. So, all right, select second rail. I want this to be something parallel if I can. And then the sweep shapes, those are going to be the counter shapes. So I can either just click on one of these other curves and then enter. And okay, that looks all right. But I can also do, if I go back to sweep 2, I can select my 2 rails, and then I can include more than one counter shape for the sweep shapes. So, all right, that looks good too. Let me delete this. Now let's try the surface from planar curves tool. We can find this in this row of different tool sets up here, just below the command history. Next to curve tools, we've got surface tools. And in this tool set right here, this little round tool, surface from planar curves. And if I select all of these curves, it builds a surface for me. And it will also do this if I go to my top viewport, back to curve tools, and I could make another rectangle, but I'll also do a circle center radius just for the sake of demonstration. And then back to perspective. In surface tools, surface from planar curves. Now this is not an exploded rectangle, it's just one solid curve. So it'll build a surface immediately from something like that. It'll do the same thing with the circle, by the way. I'm going to right click, or if you're on Mac, it'll be control click to re-equip the previously used tool, which you can see is select planar curves to build surface. Great. So I've selected my circle, press enter, and there we go. one open surface added to selection. Great. You'll notice these surfaces do have a little bit of tint. You can change how you see things like solids, surfaces. Right next to the viewport name here, so perspective, the little arrow next to it, I can swap between wireframe, which it doesn't fill in any solids for me. Shaded, it'll give me a nice opaque visual quality for the surfaces. Rendered is, if I back out here, you can see rendered is a little bit more sterile, a little cleaner. But I can also do ghosted, and if you're actually building stuff in Rhino, ghosted is kind of nice because you can see through solids like this. If we look here, I can see the text through the solid, through the surface, but I can still tell that this is a surface because it's kind of opaque, but not all the way. All right, now that's great for simple things like circles and rectangles, but here are some ways that you can apply sweep 1 and sweep 2 to some more dynamic geometry. So I've got an interpolated points curve here that kind of, it starts here, but then it works its way upwards on the z-axis a little bit. And then I've got a polygon star right at the base. So if I do sweep 1, and it'll ask me to select a rail, I'm going to use the kind of snake-like line here as a rail, and then this is going to be my sweep shape, and I'll press enter. And because this is a bit more complicated action, you can see there's a little arrow which you can move around a little bit. I typically just leave it alone unless I absolutely have to, and then I'll press enter. For now, I'm not going to make any changes here. I'm just going to leave it the way it is so I can study it. So this is pretty interesting for sweep 1. I mean, it's a very capable tool. You could do a lot of different things with this. What about sweep 2? So in this case, you know, for the snake thing, I just had one curve, one vector, one line I was using as my rail. What if I had 2? So let's try it out. Sweep 2 in the command bar. I'll select my first rail and a second rail, and then it asks to select sweep shapes. I've got these 2 other shapes attached to these rails. So let's do this one and then this one, and then enter. I'm not going to make any changes now, although some of the changes you can make with an action like this are, let's look at maintain height. So you'll notice that's a dramatic difference there on how all this geometry comes together. I do like it more with this really organic looking wave though, so I'm going to leave it that way. And yeah, for a simple command, simple 2D geometry as the foundation, this is a pretty dynamic, you know, surface that we have here, a dynamic form almost. Okay. Let's check out Loft. Loft is another really great surface tool. Here's an example of what Loft can do. You'll notice there's 2 ellipses. One of them is suspended above the other, and it's staggered off to the side a little bit. And still, there's a surface that brings those 2 ellipses together really well. So here's another set of identical ellipses staggered that way. So let's try this out. Loft in the command bar. I'm going to start with my lower ellipse and then my upper ellipse and then enter. And you'll notice again, just like with sweep 1, we've got these interesting little arrows asking us to do something. I'm not going to make any changes to their trajectory or movement. Instead, I'm just going to press enter. I'm not going to make any changes now. And let's click on this surface. And we'll notice in the command history, it says one open surface added to selection. What if we wanted to take it one step further and try 3 instead of just 2? Let's try it. Loft in the command bar. I'll start with my lower, middle, and then upper. Press enter. And enter one more time. I'll just leave all of this the way it is for now. And that's pretty cool. That's interesting. I think I could do some cool stuff with this. Now, all right. Before we move on to network surface, which is the next one, let's take a look at this particular. And remember, if we click on this, it's an open surface. So we want to close this. Anything that we send to the 3D printer, if we're doing 3D modeling, it must be either a closed poly surface exported as a .stl, or it has to be a mesh exported the very same way. So here's a great trick that we can do. I'm in Surface Tools. I'm going to use Surface from Planar Curves, and I'm just going to select the upper ellipse and then press enter. And wow, we got a surface there. Now let's select from right to left. That way we can grab this whole structure so far. And on the green curved line on the gumball, really you could use the green or the red, either are fine. I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees to tip it upside down. And I just like to do that. I don't like to rotate my viewport camera to get underneath because, I don't know, it feels a little strange to me doing it that way. I like to pretend like I'm working on a desk. That just makes it more simple for me to do this. So, surface from planar curves. I'm going to use this a second time to close the other side. And then I'm going to select everything and then type join in the command bar. Reselect it. And it says in the command history here, one closed poly surface added to selection. That's great because at this point, if I wanted to 3D print this, I could do it. And all I would have to do is, with it selected, I can go to File, Export Selected. Have a folder or some place that you can get to easily. We'll give it a name. It's a wonky, wavy thing. That's what it is. And I'm going to save it as a, let's see, .stl, stereolithography. And yeah, tolerance, this is why we set up our Rhino initially to have absolute tolerance is 0.001. Okay, great. All right, let's move on to this really cool thing. This is a network surface. If I select it, it'll tell us one open surface added to selection. And here is the construction geometry that allowed me to make it. Although I'm missing one little part here, let me add this back on. So these three curves need to be connected here. So what I'm going to do is go to Curve Tools, curve interpolate points, and then I'm just going to start from one to the next, and then right click to stop the generation of the line. I'm going to click elsewhere in the workspace to deselect that other network surface. And then I'm going to proceed to the command bar. Network SRF, that's the command for this. And then enter. And it asks select curves in network. That's going to be all 5 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then enter. And of course, just like usual with some of these complicated surface tools, we can make some changes if we want, but I think for now I'm just going to keep it the way it is. Great kind of surface command for really sculptural models. If you had something similar and you wanted to seal it all the way up to make a mesh or a closed poly surface, that's simple enough. You'll just need to find some additional geometry or create additional geometry and start closing things up, either with surface from planar curves or sweep 1 or 2. Generally, those are fine. Or loft. The loft command can be helpful for that too. All right. That is it for surface tools. It's not the full gambit of surface tools that Rhino has to offer, but I think it's perfectly sufficient for the kind of work we're going to be doing in 3D printing. All right, thank you very much.